Okay, good morning. I hope you are following me, our invited participants here and abroad in different universities. So I want to greet and welcome our guest speaker and tell him we are very honored to have him visit our campus, Nova Cairo, and we will listen to him with great interest. I also want to thank TKH, the Knowledge Hub of Universities President, Dr. Yasser Sakr, for all the support he has given to us, and Dr. Dina Borai, and particularly Ihab Salama and Mariam Draz for supporting Nova continuously in all its endeavors. It is a continuous privilege for me and for Nova. Finally, a word is for the mentor of this initiative and the person behind this idea of convening the universities of EUTOPIA. Many thanks to the Vice Rector, Professor Amar de Matos. From February 2024 and during this year, EUTOPIA's member universities are invited to join the Nova campus in Cairo, Egypt, bringing European state-of-the-art approaches to the lessons taught in situ. After its first year of operation, 22-23, the Nova campus in Cairo is promoting a series of lectures with top researchers from EUTOPIA universities. The purpose is to provide knowledge and methodologies to young Egyptian students and promote EUTOPIA outside Europe. Additionally, specialized webinars after the lectures will connect online experts from the different communities of the EUTOPIA universities with local students and academics, reinforcing Nova campus outreach and the alliance's visibility. Nova Cairo is today an EUTOPIA campus. Cities on the edge, sustainability, challenges for Mediterranean cities, Tales from Barcelona is the main topic of our conference today. The cities of the Mediterranean basin are some of the oldest cities in the world and have been able to adapt to multiple crises and transformations throughout their history. Dear Tony, I give you now the floor. Welcome.
Okay, now. Okay. First of all, thank you very much, Francisco, for your kind words. For me, it's an immense pleasure to be here. I heard about this project from Nova, from my colleague and friend, Professor Amaro de Matos, from Nova Lisbon. And I always wanted to visit this campus and know more about what is going on in Cairo. And I think Nova is doing an interesting adventure of courageous adventure to come over here and merging two innovative ideas of higher education. On one side, getting involved of this new project of European alliances in Europe that is shaking the whole higher education system in Europe. And on the other side, creating these branch campuses abroad. I think there is a lot of possibilities in the future that we can bring together these two projects. And I agree with Francisco that doing EUTOPIA, bringing EUTOPIA into Cairo will be
the people in the room cannot see you.
Okay. Okay, this is how it works this way. Is this one? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Wait, have a big head. Okay.
Can you try it?
Yeah, yes. I feel like customer service person now. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, thank you very much for all the responsible persons of this TKH and Al-Swari Foundation for giving me the opportunity to be here. And as I said, I think they open a lot of opportunities to collaboration between not only NOVA, but all the universities in EUTOPIA. As you know, EUTOPIA is a new initiative, is one of the examples of alliances of universities in Europe that started in 2019 and has been expanded over the last 5 years. And the ambition of EUTOPIA is not only to work within European universities, but going abroad that. And that's, I think, this is one of the examples to have this opportunity for our teachers, but also for our students to get this impact, these possibilities to meet people from other cultures, from other countries, from other places. And as I was mentioning, some of you, we are not that far different from one place to another. So in general, especially the people in the Mediterranean, they are not that different. Okay, my talk about today, I was asked to talk about these issues of sustainability on cities in the Mediterranean. I'm not, it's not my main area of expertise, but I'll try to do my best to make sense on organizing some ideas and some thoughts about this topic.
I need to put this in presentation modes.
But this is good enough. One moment, technical problem. This one?
Right now, I have to.
But now it's not here in the screen. Can you see?
No.
I'm sorry, this is being online. It's why we have having these technical issues.
No. Check. Duplicate.
Okay.
Oh God.
Now it's
Okay.
No, but you need to go to Zoom now.
You have to share.
Can you use this one?
This one?
Yes, because that
You
was
prefer this one?
yeah.
Okay, so
Oh, because it's here too. Okay. Okay. My presentation is organized as follows. I'm going to talk a little bit about the cities of the world in general, and how the new challenges and how the urban growth is expanding all over the world. Then I will concentrate in the Mediterranean, and then in Barcelona case, and I will end with summary. Please, I've been trained to talk for hours, so I can talk as much as I want. But if you have any questions, please interrupt me and ask me, because there will be a lot of issues we can discuss on the way. Okay, according to the United Nations Development Program, by 2030, New Delhi will become the largest city in the world, unseating Tokyo, that's been the largest until very recently. Cities are getting numbers that never seen before. So there will be a city of over 40 million people when it took centuries to have a city of more than 1 million. So in a matter of a very short period of time, we moved from very small type of cities to a completely different concept of a city. On the way here, I realized how, for example, those examples happens in parts outside Europe. The construction of new cities in Europe is not that big, but in places in the rest of the world are expanding very quickly. And the examples around this campus is one of them. Here are some images of New Delhi growth since 1989 and until now. As you can see how the red section is getting bigger and bigger as the years go, and the impact that this will be even bigger at that time. Obviously, that's something that worries. That's part of a trend that it's happening around the world. That is, for the first time around 2007, the population, urban population surpassed for the first time in history rural population. The increase is continuing, so the movement towards a much more urban population is increasing. So most of the problems of populations around the world happens in urban settings. That also allows us to discuss something some geographers and urban planners are starting to talk. What do we mean in the 21st century, what is rural and what is urban? Because everything is starting to be merged, and it's kind of a blur distinction between the two words. And that's part of the issue that happens in parts of Europe, at least, and that's a very Lefebvrean type of approach, this idea that in the 21st century, they might be places that could come considered rural, but the population that lives in those areas are urban population, that they act as urban populations. They are well connected, they have information, they have all sorts of things. And then this is kind of a not so clear, the distinction with one and another. But the truth is, by 2050, 7 out of 10 people in the world will live in what we consider now cities. So that's why the 2030 horizon of the United Nations of the Sustainable Development Goals includes a lot of these issues that are related to cities, as I will say later on. So that's why urban, I call it the urban era, because we enter an area in which urban issues will be crucial for the development of societies around the world. The expected growth of cities in the next few years of these mega cities will happen mostly in Asia and in Africa. That's the area in which the continents were expected to have bigger cities. I think India has a plan of constructing, I don't know, enormous quantity of new cities to this diminish the number of slums in their big cities and move it to places that are more healthier and better environments. And that's happened only in India. China has done an incredible work on creating big cities. And so is that's a part of the history. So when the European expansion with colonization, we created cities in the places we went. The Portuguese in Brazil, the Spaniards in the rest of Latin America, the British in the rest of the world. So basically this creation of cities has happened, was part of this colonization process. Right now it's more like a process of how to cope with demographic growth in those cities and economic development. The biggest mega cities in the future, as you can see in this graphic, will be mostly in sub-Saharan Africa and Central and Eastern Asia. Very few will happen, and there will be no mega cities growth beside London in Europe, but the rest of the cities in Europe are very stable. So that's why coming from Europe to tell how to deal with cities in the rest of the world is kind of controversial, because we are in a moment in cities in Europe are not growing as the path the rest of the world is happening. If we move to the Mediterranean, very few of these cities, of mega cities, will be in the Mediterranean. Besides Cairo and Istanbul, there is not major metropolis in that area. So Cairo will be together with Istanbul, and then the other three big cities on the axis of on the rim of the Mediterranean will be Alexandria, Algiers, and Barcelona. But talking about Barcelona comparing to Cairo in terms of dimension is ridiculous, because it's a very tiny city and very compact city, so complete in terms of size. But obviously, it's a metropolitan area of over 5 million people, so it's. I wanted to mention it to put it in context with Cairo. Mediterranean cities, as Professor Francisco was saying before, are among the oldest cities in the world. So basically, the urban revolution happens not far from the Mediterranean rim, and some of these cities that appear in this map are among the oldest in the world. And they have been able to adjust to different modes of production, different types of civilization, different uses and political context. So how they cope this area of the world with the new situation will be the topic of this presentation. I believe the Mediterranean as a whole, not just the cities, share very interesting things. So Mediterranean at this moment, as I said before, is not the area that is growing faster, is not one of the growing or booming economic centers, but there are areas that become outstanding compared to the rest of the world. The first of all will be trade. The Mediterranean is one of the areas in which most of the traffic, shipping, crosses across the Mediterranean. It's been like that since the beginning of the times. So the Phoenicians were crossing the Mediterranean to go all the way to Lisbon, and then there being all these connections between one side and the other. That's why harbors around Europe has been so important since the beginning of the times. But right now, the Suez Canal and Gibraltar is one of these two axes in which people are crossing from one place to another and keep going continuously. And that creates a lot of problems in terms of security, pollution, geopolitical context, geopolitical issues in that area that create a lot of problems. For example, in the case of Spain, right now, there's a lot of controversial. There's the biggest harbor in Spain is in Algeciras, not far from Gibraltar. But Morocco is now building the biggest container harbor in Tangier, a place that's called Tangier Met, and they're competing with the others. So both sides of Gibraltar Strait will have biggest harbors for containers moving on. And at the same time, creates a lot of other controversies. That area is also one of the biggest entry of all sorts of drugs to Europe. So there's another of the, not drugs from Africa, there are drugs coming from America, that's established in there, and then they cross into the border. And obviously, not by chance, attached to that area, we have a place that's called Gibraltar, that is a good place to hide your money after that, doing all that trade. So that's creating a sort of an environment of trade that are many of those around the Mediterranean. So that's one of the examples. The second thing is fishing. Fishing has been another environmental problem in the Mediterranean. It's been fishing since it's been used as to feed the population or to explode the resources of the sea for centuries. And now we're getting to a point of putting in risk the sustainability of that issue. There is all sorts of things. Spain, again, is in the bad side in here because it's one of the most, has one of the most extended fleet. It's in an area that we use a lot of ships, and not all the techniques they use for fishing are the best for the sustainability of the ocean. So there's a lot of negotiation. So that one of the biggest complaints Spain has with the rest of Europe is all the time about the fishing possibilities. And then they have all fights, especially with Morocco, Mauritania, about their fishing banks. So, you know, all that stuff, it's becoming another thing. But fishing is another area of conflict and sharing environmental issues around the Mediterranean. This is for me, is very important. As you can see in this graphic, the Mediterranean concentrates the biggest tourist attraction in the whole world. Spain, I think, is right now the second recipient of tourists around the world after France. But obviously here we have the third and the fourth, and France is Mediterranean, Italy, Greece, Egypt, Morocco. So if you can look here, I think it's, I can hardly see it, but I think it's over, if you compare the Northern Africa, there is this red section, plus the blue one, that is the European side. It's about a third of the tourists around the world concentrated in the Mediterranean. One big problem in here, and we will go on after this, the Mediterranean weather or climate is really, really dry in the summer. And tourists like to swim and shower. So in the times that we have more people is when less water we have. And that, as you see, is a big issue in Spain right now at this moment, with the droughts affecting huge areas in the country. So that's another thing. So it's not that important that we are not a megalopolis, that we are not the biggest places for cities, but we are probably one of the biggest areas for tourism. So the floating population is changing, is increasing the population of many places around the Mediterranean, in particular moments of times, creating a lot of pressure into the scarce resources we have. That will be the other part on tourism. Finally, farming. In an area that is really rich for farming, especially on here we have the blue sections are the ones that are irrigation that affects very few parts of the Mediterranean, but then the other types of crops. As I said, sometimes in Spain, in the case in Turkey is the same thing. We have this problem that we have all these crops that are across the Mediterranean that needs a lot of water. And especially during the summer, they have to compete with these floating population that are getting there. So I want it. And finally, a much more social, this is an area of migration, legal or illegal. It's been like that from the beginning of the times. But now it's a very strong thing. So Spain and Italy, for example, or Greece are getting all these trials, all these issues with the European Union, who has to take care of the control of the borders and how to treat all the migration that goes there. But obviously, sometimes we forget that the other rim of the Mediterranean also suffer from the same place, because the people are getting into those countries trying to cross to the other side. So that's creating a lot of issues constantly. And that's another of the things we share across the Mediterranean. So that's, I thought it could be interesting to see all these different issues. Again, migration is creating, for example, enormous compounds, especially in places like these cities in Northern Africa, of creating all these retention center for migrants that are trying to go abroad. These people are also needs some resources, and there is a lot of problems with this. We share, though, a series of environmental problems. Obviously the biodiversity, overfishing, intensive farming, and so on. Water and air pollution created by the traffic of ships, but also by the use of not good sewage systems getting into the water. We are suffering as climate change affecting droughts and fires and floods continually. That's something we share with all the countries in the Mediterranean. So every summer we heard about these wildfires happening somewhere in Portugal, for example, a few years ago. Last year was Greece, and then the year before was elsewhere. Then after those, we have droughts that affect like the one that's experiencing Spain right now, or floods when finally rain came. So our weather is becoming more and more drier and drier, and it's becoming more desert-like than it used to be. So it's getting warmer every time. Barcelona, we will get into that in a second, but it's been experiencing the warmest summers in 3 years in a row. And this year it's been an incredible winter. So at this moment, it's warmer in Barcelona than it is here in Cairo. Those things have been integrated by the Mediterranean Strategy for Sustainable Development of the United Nations, and includes all these sustainable development goals included in the strategy for the Mediterranean. There are many things that we can talk about: the fishing, or the water, and so on. In this case, we're gonna cross on planning and managing sustainable Mediterranean cities. As I said, most of the population of the Mediterranean lives in cities, so it makes sense to do sustainable cities for these people. That's the concentration for the third part of my presentation. The case of Barcelona, I wanted to start saying Barcelona is not by far a big city compared to some of the cities we just talked before. It's the metropolitan region. If we consider the whole thing, is about 5 million people. Compared to Istanbul or Cairo, it's nothing. But we share with them, there are very old cities who were created in the case of Barcelona, was created in Roman times. And it's been, as a city that experienced, I'll explain in a second, a very important medieval past, and then a huge expansion. At the moment, the biggest expansion will be during the industrial era. Some of the infrastructures of each of these periods are creating restraints for the growth in the future. So every time we move from one place to another, those things we built before create some sort of limits for the growth in the future. And in the case of Barcelona, it's quite clear. Since the 1990s, and especially after the Olympic Games in 1992, Barcelona has become an incredible attraction hub for tourists around the world. The city of Barcelona, the city itself, is 1.6 million. We receive around 12 million tourists a year. The infrastructures are completely overwhelmed. There is no way for those. And they are creating a lot of side effects. So honestly, I have to say, when in the 1970s or 80s, Barcelona was not even in the map of the destinations to visit in Spain. So if you go to Spain, the list of places you have to visit was Granada or Sevilla or Madrid. And Barcelona was considered an ugly industrial city in the Mediterranean that nobody wanted to go. After the Olympics, well, sometimes people know before what Barcelona is before Spain is. So it's very clear. Americans, tourists, Asians, people from all over. And I remember, to make the comparison, when the Olympics were created, Barcelona only had 5 luxury hotels, and they were planning to build 2 more. And then the city council and the Chamber of Commerce were concerned, what are we going to do with these hotels when the Olympics are over? Nobody want to come back afterwards. So we end up with those 7 hotels. Right now, I think we have over 50 or 45. It keeps going and going and going. Remember, right after the Olympics, Barcelona started to celebrate a lot of exhibits or expos or conventions. And I remember in 1996, because the whole architecture issue became very important, like the Barcelona model as a model of transformation of this industrial city into a modern 21st century city, they organized the International Conference for Architects. There were no space to hold them. So now we have obviously all these event places, and then it's one of the biggest cities for organizing. But think about this. We are competing in terms of these big events with cities like London or Paris. But this is Barcelona. It's very tiny compared to them. So we are having sorts of problems with this. So we get into that in a second. Let me show you, the city was, this is graphic, how Barkino, that was the old Roman city, was created in times of Augustus. So by the time Cleopatra was having deals with Caesar here, that were creating Barcelona on the other side. And then it was not very important city. It was a very tiny harbor town. The big city in that area was Tarragona, Tarraco. And then it became very important in the Middle Ages for one reason. Barcelona was the border between Christianity and Islam. So the Islamic conquer to the peninsula ends more or less was defeated by Poitiers, by Charlemagne, and all that stuff. And then they moved the border across the Pyrenees in something that was called the Hispanic Mark. The end of the Hispanic Mark was Barcelona. So for some centuries, Barcelona was the southernmost harbor in the Christianity. So that's why Barcelona became important, not because it has a fantastic location, because at that moment, geopolitical was an important place. Let me show you another thing, that is this map of Barcelona today. This is the city of Barcelona. The city of Barcelona has around 1.7 million people. What I said, the 5 million will be the whole metropolitan area. Here I wanted to show you very quickly the locations of all these places. One of the things is very neat in Barcelona is you can tell the history of the city just by saying the map, by looking at the map. You see this? Yeah. The Roman city is this tiny circle in the middle. In the medieval ages is this huge thing. The famous avenue of Ramblas used to be the wall of the city, is one of the walls. And then during the, during the 17th century, during the 18th century, they created this neighborhood by the beach because part of the city was destroyed after a war, and they relocated the people from that area into this new neighborhood. This is one of probably the most popular neighborhoods in the city that's called Barceloneta, and it's by the beach. And it used to be a poor neighborhood, and now it's the most expensive neighborhood by a square meter in the city because it's on the beach. Then the most important part of addition of this area was the Eixample, the enlargement plan by the urban planning Nivell Fuensardà in the 19th century. The city was defeated after a war in the 1700s, and they were not allowed any construction between the medieval city and the outskirt towns that were on the foothills of the city. So this area that is here was completely empty for about 150 years. When the Industrial Revolution hit the city, they needed more space, and they urbanized that area using this square system. Very well, probably is one of the best examples of urban planning in the 19th century in Southern Europe, creating these squares, blocks with a lot of open space, good analysis of the mobility and so on. So I thought for a moment to talk about this more for this presentation, but I thought let's move it to, but I think seeing how Sardà, the planner in the 19th century, tried to solve issues that were not considered at that time environmental, are not that different how we are trying to solve those things now. So it's basically the same thing happens 200 years later. So we're going through the same process in a new context. So I wanted to show you this to see how you can see the different parts of the city just by looking at the map. Not many cities in Europe happens that. For example, you go to London or Paris, all the medieval part has been destroyed and created a new one. In this case, it's preserved in a way. Let me show you some recent news on Barcelona. The European Union Court rules against Spain for air pollution in Madrid and Barcelona. We have serious problems of pollution, especially when they have a very stable weather with high pressures, so create all these things. We tend to say we are better than Madrid always by saying that since we are by the sea cleans that dirt all the time. But the truth is we are having serious problems with pollution. Second, this is from this week, droughts. We have had rain for 3 years in a row. The number of the rain we got in the last 3 years is less than 30% of what is usual. And that's combined with high temperatures. So that's creating no water. So this is one of the bigger reservoirs of water in the outskirts of Barcelona that is completely dry right now. There's no water at all. Third, housing. This is the biggest thing. Housing has been increased over, no, since the Olympics has been growing, doubling prices every 4 or 5 years. But now we have a very serious problem, not only about housing price to buy, but also for rental prices, because the tourists are increasing that price a lot. Ships. So we became the biggest harbor for cruise ships, and they're creating huge problems of pollution in the harbor. So they are trying to get, there's not only problems with, the whole thing about cruise ships is becoming really controversial because the harbor of Barcelona is very close to the city. So the pollution from the harbor gets immediately into the city. But second, you imagine that we get at some points like 15 of those huge cruise ships getting into the city in the same day. So you have over 35,000 people going together at the same time to Sagrada Familia to visit. So everything is, and then the second thing, cruise ships, they don't spend a penny in the city. So they go with cruise ships tours that are organized by the cruise ship, and they go back to the ship to eat. So they don't even, maybe they buy some magnets or something like that, but that's it. So it's the type of tourist that doesn't, I think it's working. Read something. I think it doesn't work now. Sorry. Battery's off. Sorry. It's a time of tourist infrastructure that gets a lot of money to the yeah. No. Probably is the battery. Here's the battery. Okay, I speak louder then. I mean, it's a kind of ship industry that doesn't help very much to the city itself, but creates a lot of side effects. And finally, heat. For 3 years in a row, we have the record high temperatures during the summer. Barcelona was never a very hot city during the, well, it was hot because it's in the Mediterranean and so on, but probably temperatures were around the 30s. Now we hit the 40s. So that's becoming even more problems. And that including the, this way. I'm not sure. Okay. Okay. No, that's okay. We can do this. Okay. I think the people who work here have a smaller. So those are just, I wanted to show some of the problems that appear on the news over the last few weeks in Barcelona. So the heat in the summer, the problems with housing, the model of tourism that we're getting, pollution, water scarcity, and so on. Here are some data. The region of the metropolitan area of Barcelona has a 3.2. The region, metropolitan region, will be the one who has for about 5.5 million. As you can see, solid waste and water consumption are decreasing. So there's been campaigns constantly doing by increasing prices, basically, or increasing fines to reduce the number of solid waste each family are producing, and also the consumption of water. So the number of liters of water that is going down very quickly. Land use, the whole metropolitan area that has about 50% that is green space or forest, but not the city itself. The city is a very dense type of city, not much parks inside, but it's surrounded by a national park that is basically where this 50% is. There is a mountain, there is a park that is kind of an urban park. Residential is about 20%, and you can see the rest of other uses in that area. Here you have what is the map of what it is, all those things. This darker spot is the city of Barcelona, 1.6 million. The metropolitan area will be the reddish one, that will be about 3.5, and the metropolitan area, and then the region, that will be the 5.5 million people. That will be the whole area that I'm trying to talk about. The things I wanted to talk in this one, there are 5 topics: mobility, housing, what the city is doing, and what are the problems, urban metabolism, environmental governance, and then the new strategies from this idea of the smart city concept to the tactic urbanism that has to do with different political positions of the city hall and the city of the regional government. Mobility. That's a big problem for the city, moving all these people around, and it happens all this as the city becomes larger and larger, mobility become a very important issue. The enlargement plan created in the 19th century, creating this octagonal system of streets for the cars to go from one place to another. And it was a very equal type of system in which all the streets have the same width, and so everything could be distributed equally. The idea that some of the urban planners are presenting in the city, and it's received prizes all over, and then everyone is very happy about it, is this idea of the super blocks. So imagine a block of houses like the one that appear here. Instead of having cars going back and forth across the whole block, reserve the central part of the block, of the 9 blocks of housing, for pedestrians, no cars allowed, and creating all this green space in the middle, like in the photograph here. That seems like a great idea. So let's create more space for what is happening. That's very recent. It's less than 10 years. Yes, it's fantastic for the people who live here. But what happens with the ones who are outside? That they increase the number of cars instead of decreasing them. So before, the number of cars crossing across was more or less equal in all the streets. Now you divert these things into the outskirts, so the ones that are outside, then they get higher. The second thing, housing prices in these areas have increased enormously, expelling the locals outside and moving people inside. So there are back and forth problems. The second big issue, and that's being implemented or influenced by the European policy, is creating these free, what is called low emission zones in the city of Barcelona. All this green area on the city of Barcelona is under this low emission zone. So you have to have one of the labels for the car with the C, B, or whatever. And then if you don't have the tag that allows you getting in, you cannot get into that part. So it's only cars that are low emissions that can get in. The idea is that eventually, when there's a high rise of pollution in the city, they will restrict even more the number of cars they can get in. That's, again, sounds like a good idea. So you avoid getting cars into the city. The problem is, as you saw in the map I showed you before, the city of Barcelona has merely 1.5 million, and the metropolitan region has 5. Most of these 5 million people are commuting back and forth into the center. So how they can get in if you cannot get into the car? And that's why I put it in red here. the public transportation system works quite well inside the city, but is inefficient to connect all these areas in the metropolitan area. And in the last 30 years, what has happened in Barcelona is more and more residential areas are very far away in the middle of nowhere. So the connection by public transportation is not efficient enough. So since the 2021, I think, public transportation trains getting into Barcelona are completely free. You don't have to pay. And still, traffic is not going down. It's not a time, it's a problem of time. It's a problem of efficiency. You take 1 hour and a half to get to work. Beside, if you take 15 minutes, it's not. And then it's also not very inclusive. It affects people, people who is wealthy, they can buy an electric car. People who is not wealthy still stick with a very old car that is highly polluted. People who is wealthy can pay for a parking slot, a parking space. People who is not, they cannot. So how to solve that will be one of the biggest issues right now. And it's very controversial constantly. For me, for example, the previous one, the super blocks, will be a neat idea, but you don't need to do only one street. Or you do all, or you do nothing, because if not, what you're creating is a different situation for different parts of the city and is not efficient enough. Second thing, housing. I will go very quickly because it's not so much about environmental, it's more social issues. What is the cause of increase of the prices? The city of Barcelona, not the metropolitan area, there's a lack of housing. However, Spain is quite interesting. I think has the biggest, at least in Southern Europe, biggest number of empty houses in the whole European Union. But those empty houses are summer houses. So we have the whole beach constructed with no one living there during the winter time. Since climate change is going so quickly, eventually those places will be used all year round. But at this moment, you have huge areas on the coast, nothing in the winter, and full in the summer. But in the city of Barcelona, it happens the same thing in Madrid, it's slightly different. Madrid is much larger, it has different things. There's a lack of supply of new or used houses, so there is no houses. Increasing population, migration, people from other places moving in. And a new problem, and I think Lisbon is suffering the same thing. I don't know if Cairo is getting into that. Yeah. No, in Spain. In Barcelona city, no, it's all year round. I think I said, I didn't explain myself. I said the whole country, Spain, has a lot of empty houses. Not Barcelona. Barcelona is everything full. I hope it was empty. No. Now Barceloneta is a neighborhood within it and also full. So the thing is that in Barcelona we get a lot of new residents, migrants, people who comes to live here from all over the world. I think population in Barcelona has, I think, over 150 nationalities living inside the city. So it's basically people from all over. But the biggest problem right now, Barcelona was issued like Portugal, the golden visa. So people are moving there to buy houses or increasing prices. People who has a lot of money. Second, digital nomads. We have a very good airport that connects you with any city in Europe for very reduced price. So there's a lot of people moving in Barcelona with salaries from Switzerland or from UK, living in the city of Barcelona, buying houses that people in Barcelona cannot afford. So that's creating a huge problem. It happens in many cities, but Barcelona is suffering from that. Tourist rentals. Airbnb has hit the whole market of rentals. So for example, one of the biggest problems the university has right now, there is no housing for students. They are charging for resident halls around 1,300 euros a month for an apartment that doesn't even have a kitchen inside. So it's more costly than the university for a year, 1 month. So it's creating a lot of problems because what? Before there were people willing to rent to students for the whole school year. Now it's better to put it on Airbnb, and in 15 days you make more money. That's why Barceloneta is so expensive. Barceloneta has the tiniest, ugliest apartments in the whole city because they were fishermen. So they were very tiny, 30 square meters apartments in very bad conditions. They were built in the 1700s, but people are willing to pay the most to live there. And that's what the maps show you. For buying, the most expensive part of Barcelona is the north, the foothills of the city towards the south of this, this will be let me think it. The northwest, the southwest part of the city will be the most expensive part. It's all this area over here. Neighborhoods like Sarrià, Las Corts, Pedralbes, and so on. And parts of the Eixample, the larger plan. The most expensive rentals are by the sea, obviously because they want to live there by the beach. So that's creating a market of housing extremely impossible for locals. And these locals are moving outside the city, creating another problem for mobility. So that's one of the biggest side effects of all this process. Finally, Spain has failed for 40 years to provide a good system of public housing. Everything is private sector. So it's very difficult for someone with a middle range salary to afford the house in the city of Barcelona right now. So that's one of the biggest problems in housing. That creates, as a side effect, environmental problems, obviously. I'm not going to extend in this because I'm not an expert, and I know there are engineers in the room and they will know more about this. There's all these policies about how to do with the metabolism. What I mean by metabolism is this model that talks about what's get inside the city, so food, materials, energy, and what's get out. Dirty waters, fumes, or whatever. There is different campaigns by different administrations to create selective trash collection, recycling collections. It's imposed, and Barcelona is not doing fantastic, but it's getting better and better every year. As you can see, the waste is going down slightly. Now there is a big problem of how much food waste we create. So food that we don't eat and we throw away. So there's all sorts of things of getting second markets. Since we don't have water, now they're starting to pump water that's been treated in the sewer plants back into the system. So they clean it up and put it back because there is no water. So they needed to do that thing. There's a huge project right now with European funds. And that's funny. Barcelona has so much sun in Europe. We used to have less solar panels than places in Northern Europe. Now, finally, there's been a project and it's been implemented to have solar panels all over. And I think Portugal is going through the same thing. And then finally, desalination plants to get water. But desalination, again, is a solution when there's a scarcity of water, but it's really expensive and really pollutant. So it creates a lot of pollution. So those are some of the issues that are getting there. I want to get into this because I think that's the key issue in every time we have to make a decision on environment. And I think since environment got into the agendas of rulers of cities much more recently than we thought, the capacity of making regulations on the environment depends on different levels of administration. So you want to rule something on cars, and happens that that is part of the task that can be only done by the Spanish ministry. Or you want to do something in terms of increase the number of public transportation, and that goes into a different administration. So there is not a coherence on how to get all these things together in a comprehensive way and get it together. So we have all these things scattered between the municipality in this case, the metropolitan region, the provincial council, the regional government of Catalonia, the Spanish government, the European Union, and finally, the regulations by or the recommendations by United Nations. This is kind of bad as it is, but if you think that municipality is one political party, metropolitan region is another one, and the regional council is another one, each of them will like to get the medal for doing this. So they go once against the other. So sometimes they make ridiculous solutions. Let me show you one. As a solution, this is this week news. No water in Barcelona. That could put in risk the tourist season, because most of the tourists, it's not only summer, but they come in the summer a lot. And tourists have the bad habit of taking shower and using the swimming pools. So they need water. So Barcelona will bring water in tanks, in ships, from Valencia Harbor, from a desalination plant. This is what the politicians are using to say to the population, because we have elections, that we solve the problem. This is not the problem. This is not the solution. It will be extremely costly, highly pollutant, and each of those ships is less than 1% of the consumption of water one day. So it's nothing. So they cannot do anything. But that's one of those solutions that came as a final solution very quickly. In the meantime, over the last 10 years, no infrastructures for providing water to the city has gone. So that's, for me, is one of those examples of improvisation and that's, I think, it's another thing, unfortunately, we share all cities around the world, and especially in the Mediterranean. Finally, and that's will be the end of my presentation, and I think it's the part, for me, more interesting in this. There are, during the last 20 years, approximately, there's been a shifting in the orientation of the city hall and the region of Barcelona governance, from a very conservative to a very leftist type of government. And I wanted to show you how they cope with the challenges of the future, the two models. The first one, during the period, I think it's 2012 to 2016 approximately, we have a very conservative government by Xavier Trias, was the mayor of Barcelona, and they pushed the whole agenda into this idea of the smart city concept. The smart city concept means to use all the data that is created by people to provide better services for population. So and they actually organized since then, since he was there, a smart city congress in Barcelona to talk about those things. And Barcelona is doing quite well on those things. The bad side of the smart city concept is that the idea is, okay, let's use big data that we create with the cell phones to reorganize public transportation. So they know the bus where the people are located, so they can move around that area. Or let's do a much more efficient way to collect the trash. Or the bad side, and there are a lot of scholars in Barcelona working on this, in the long term, it means privatization of public services that used to be free and now they are more expensive. So with the excuse that it's more efficient, all this technical thing, it creates even more expensive for certain people. The second thing, obviously, not everyone has access to the same way to all these connections. So that's creating a lot of inefficiency on those things. That's the first model. The model that moved into, I think it's 2014 or 2015, when he stepped down because they lost the elections and the new mayor came in. The second model is also extremely controversial. It's what they call tactical urbanism. The idea is, and it came in a moment of financial crisis, no money. So let's do fancy new stuff in the city without putting any money on it. So what they do, instead of transforming a street, is drawing lines in the streets. So basically, there's all the cities drawn with all these different things, creating new spaces for, for example, during the pandemic, since there were no cars, they created a lot of spaces for getting terraces so that people can get out for drinks or so on. So they are not in a enclosed area. So by drawing a space, getting a space out of the cars and creating those things. The idea could be very neat. And you can see here this space in the middle of the street that now is a playground, or getting terraces out of the space that used to be for parking, a space for cars. So by just putting some elements that can be moved. The idea of the tactical urbanism is this: try this type of solutions for the new uses of the city that can be eventually transformed in a permanent thing if it works. The truth is that creating really a mess in some areas, because there are people going with a car and then suddenly that car that used to be a normal car is not going. Commercial spaces are complaining because now the cars aren't going to get there, so they cannot drop the whatever things they have to drop there. So there's all these issues. You know, it's funny because this is like the leftist type of approach. The other one was more. This true that this is one of the examples. They've done a lot of things to improve the quality of life within the city, creating a lot of open spaces, much more relaxed. They go into this concept of the 15-minute city, so that you can, in a city like Barcelona works, that you don't need a car. You can walk to do most of the things you need to do by 15 minutes walking. But again, that works in the center part of the city. When you go to the metropolitan area, it doesn't. So that's the second thing. Let me go to the summary of these things, and obviously we can go into questions later. The world has experienced a massive increase of urban population. Not so much the Mediterranean area, though. Especially in the northern rim. The southern rim, we might expect some growth in cities in the northern African countries. We share similar environmental and social issues, and I think it will be not so much going into these technicalities and the use of new technologies, sometimes using more common sense acquired over centuries, in some cases could be much more important. And that's something we need to share. Barcelona is trying to cope with several environmental related challenges like water scarcity, as I said, air pollution, water treatment, mobility issues, with good and bad solutions being implemented. Finally, there are two contracting models are trying to solve some of those problems. A more technical scientific model using these new technologies to solve some of the problems that can be accused, but not always could be like that, that create even more inequalities within the city. However, for example, I was mentioning before, there is a lot of engineers talking right now that it's considered that by, I think it's 2000, I don't know, they say different years, but let's say by 2035, most of the cars in the city will be electric or will not use gasoline anymore, or not combustion things, and there will be self-drivers. So they don't need a driver inside. And I don't know if you ever thought about that. If you have a car that's self-drive, you don't need to park it anywhere, because you take the car and say, go back home and park yourself. Or you don't need a car. You just need an application and say, I need a car to go from here to there, and the car will come, take you there. That will leave incredible amount of land in the city that they are now used for parking lots that will be empty. We don't need it. So imagine a city without cars. Immediately we have a lot of space that are now used for cars, and they will be reduced. What we'll do with that? That will be a very interesting challenge for urban plannings in the future. And that's part of this technicality that will be very interesting, these technical uses of things. The other thing, the social approach, the use of tactical strategies to gain open space for residents. I think we need to find ways that both ideas get together in a way and build something that is more sustainable in the long run, and also improve the quality of the quality of life in the cities in general. So this is more or less what I wanted to present for all of you. I don't know if you have any questions or you want to talk about any particular topics. Yeah.
To open the debate, the discussion. We have colleagues at home that are following this conference. So if you could unshare stop sharing your.
Okay, let's see if I can find it. Stop sharing. Okay.
Okay. So we are going to follow the technique of raising your hands if you want to to address a question. We have here one at the room, Sophia. Now you may start.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting. I was always expecting where to go from here. It just do the diagnosis and know where to go. But one question I have is that like blame the Olympic Games for Barcelona.
No, I didn't blame. No.
It seems just a difference.
No, I will go into that. Yeah.
Nice way to support Olympic Games and not Olympic Games. The last slide we had the city aspirations. And it was a very strange sentence because you consider the social challenges and the environmental limits to the city's aspiration. And what is the city aspiration? And are the environmental issues posing limits? Are they posing challenges for improving the city? And so it's a completely different way of seeing it. The environment being the reason for the city to become more sustainable and not as a limit for the aspirations, whatever those aspirations are, growing even more people, even more cars, even more land.
Oh, completely agree with you.
And the other thing is the idea of electric cars. Absolutely no congestion problem will be solved if they are all.
I know.
And also another thing that I missed is the energy transition. We didn't speak so much about climate change, it's the impact of climate change, but not the climate change itself. And not so much the causes and what can change.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, one by one. Remind me if I forget any. What I said about the Olympics, I tried to say is that the Olympics was a turning point of a city that was not attractive for tourists to become a tourist attraction. That's what's happened during since 1992. Barcelona was a city that people visited only when it was raining on the beach. So the tourists that were on the tourist resorts by the beach, north or south of Barcelona, they spend a day in Barcelona the day it was raining because they cannot go to the beach. That was the traditional thing. I remember when I was a student, the summer in Barcelona, the city was completely empty. No one was there because it was not a tourist city. After the Olympics, they transformed the image of the city outside and started to attract a lot of tourists. I didn't say it was a problem. It was creating a new type of situation, a new type of reality. And now Barcelona receives tourists all year round. So we have tourists from different kinds. So during the summer, during the winter, every time there is a lot of people. So that creates bad things and good things, obviously. But that's what I tried to say. There was a turning point during the Olympics. Then the second question, I forgot, it was about. What I tried to say with the model of development of the city, it's very clear we're getting into a moment that the environment cannot resist that model. So we have to transform both things, how we protect the environment, also what type of activities we do. We have to do both things at the same time. That's my opinion. Because the way we are using resources right now is unsustainable. What I mean is we've been using a lot of water for different uses, and we haven't created the resources enough for getting to talk about the water, for example, or the energy, or so on. So I think the model of development that has worked for us as a tourist destination, let's say, or for an industrial thing for the last 30 years, is getting into a moment that has to be rethought, has to think, we need to think about it again. So that's what I mean. Probably the phrase was not the most appropriate, but I didn't mean, obviously, it's a way it's an opportunity to think better ways to develop. But what I mean is the model we have so far, and some of the biggest actors in the economic side, they don't want to change. They want to keep going. You know, the number of the applications to get more ships into the harbor, to increase the carrying capacity of the ships of the harbor, to increase the number of flights into Barcelona for more tourists. We're getting to a point that it's not sustainable. We need to rethink how we. That's what I mean for that. I didn't talk about, as I said, I didn't talk about the energy efficiency. You know, the reasons for the climate changes are beyond the city of Barcelona. It's something much bigger than that. But it's obviously the Mediterranean is quite clear that is one it's going to be one of the areas going to be affected the most by that climate change. And we have been trying to neglect those things because we thought, well, that will happen later, but now it's here. So that's very clear. And I tried to go very quickly into that slide that talks about different things. Spain, for years, not Barcelona, but Spain as a general, they have an electricity market, the production of electricity that is highly monopolized by big companies. And these companies didn't want the people to move into solar panels, private solar panels. So for years, there were a lot of restrictions, a lot of problems, not the restrictions, but a lot of barriers in order to establish your own. Now we are moving into a model that it can be, and it's quite clear that domestic consumption can be covered only with solar panels. The ones, industrial will be different, but for that will be enough. So we are moving into that direction. For pollution, it's very clear in a very dense city, high condenser. With this, what I try to say, we need to create better systems of mobility, and we have now a good opportunity. That's one of the things that are happening. Is after the pandemic, a lot of people are starting to work in the office only once or twice a week, and the rest of the days are working from home, reducing the number of the commuting back and forth. So that's another thing. Yeah, sorry. I don't know if it's yeah.
Okay, now let's hear from Maria José Roxo from the School of Social Sciences and Humanities, Department of Geography. You are muted.
Hello, thank you very much for your presentation. Well, the question I have is about water, because water is a very, very important issue in the moment because of climate change, but because all the things we know we're going to pass with cities. And what I want to know if Barcelona have already something like we begin to do in Lisbon, is to create some reservoirs of water, and also to change the paradigm. Then cities must produce water and not only consume water, because it's very important that cities can produce water because they can build green spaces, lakes, and also to reduce consumes and recycle waters. In Lisbon, we begin to use reservoirs to also to minimize the impact of floods, but is a way to go to produce water. And I think in the future, the empty space you talk about can be spaces to produce water, because water is going to be the main issue, in my point of view, in the future of cities.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think in the Mediterranean, especially, because it's an area that's becoming very dry. Yeah, I cannot agree more. The problem is that we are using reservoirs outside the city, but those reservoirs are not receiving water anymore. So that's the problem. Or we're getting a scarcity of water for a long, long period of time. The other thing, and that's why I think we need to take into these topics from a very comprehensive way, is that we are competing for water uses not only by urban residents, but also by agriculture. And we have a type of agriculture in certain parts of Spain and in the Barcelona region that are not really efficient in the use of water. So I think we need to create a system that it's more, because I think in general, if you look at the data, the water use, the water consumption by resident in the Barcelona region is quite low compared to other countries. So it's quite low. And it's been reduced over the years. So the people is quite concerned about how to reduce the water uses. The problem is that we get all this influx of foreigners or of residents that come from outside, that will be tourists and so on, the industrial uses, but especially agriculture, because we have a type of farming, especially grazing animals that use lots and lots of quantity of water and creates a lot of byproducts that needs to be cleaned up with water. So the use of water in those areas are very bad. So that's why I think, as I was mentioning, it's not only what we do for solving this problem, how we transform the way we use our mode of production, how we use things. So the way we've been developed so far, we get into a moment that has to be rethought. It has to be thought again and think about ways to use less of those resources. Yeah, but I agree. Yeah. And the empty space, well, that's one of the things, this idea of creating less concrete and more ground that water can go and deposit itself into the aquifers, and yeah, completely.
Now we have Gonçalo Antunes, also from the Department of Geography, the School of Science and Technology, and the specialist on housing policies. So go ahead, Gonçalo.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Antonio Luna Garcia, for the presentation. It was excellent. In recent years, Barcelona was undergone various social and urban transformations, as you told. You spoke to us about tourism and the pressure that tourism is putting on local resources. Several European cities are, especially in the south of Europe, are currently experiencing high housing price growth. The same is happening here in Lisbon. In the case of Barcelona, I would like to know if you think that the growth in tourism and the short-term rentals could be one of the reasons for the increase in the housing prices, and also what is doing or what is being done to solve this problem. What kind of policies are being applied? Thank you.
Okay, housing, it's a presentation in itself, actually, because it's a very difficult thing to talk in 5 minutes. But I'm going to go against what I said before. We blame the tourists for all the problems of housing, but it's not only the tourists. Or what is a tourist? That's the question, because we consider tourists everyone that is not from the city, that lives in the city. But we have different types of things. We have the visitors that they're for a day or a couple of days or 3 days. Those are not the problems, because they are going to places that are organized to receive them. The problem is cities like Barcelona and Lisbon is going in the same track, and other places around Southern Europe especially. We're starting to get these people that lives in the city for 6 months or 3 months or 4 months. Are those tourists or semi-residents, or how we call them? Then we have all these digital nomads, that there are people who work in one place, but they live in another place. So we have all these different situations that are new for the cities that are creating a pressure into the housing market. So that's the big thing. Obviously, they have platforms like Airbnb that are getting more, because that's one of the things. The city is doing a lot of work, and you probably are familiar with the case of Barcelona. You know different platforms. The previous mayor of the city, that was this lady, that was an activist before being a mayor, to go against these platforms, are trying to get you know, in order to be able to rent your house through Airbnb, you have to get a permission, because there used to be these huge tenants that were buying or renting apartments all over the city and putting them in Airbnb. Now trying to avoid that those monopolization of resources are going into a few hands. Because actually, if I have to be honest, I think if it's Airbnb is from an individual person, it's not so bad, because you are putting a tourist in a neighborhood that usually don't have a tourist in that area. They will shop and use resources, and they will do some economic impact in that part that usually don't have. But when it becomes so huge, then the second thing they did was to stop creating more hotels in the more dense area of the city and putting the hotels elsewhere, trying to cope with this. And then finally, as I said, there is a new policy that was first implemented by the City Hall of Barcelona, then it was stopped by the government in Spain, and now the government of Spain has implemented their own, a system of creating a limit on the prices of rentals, not to get beyond a certain point. We don't know how it's going to be, if it's going to be effective or not, but the prices in Barcelona are unbearable. You know, the price of a house is something someone with a salary in Barcelona cannot afford, even if a middle-sized salary is impossible. So it's creating this type of dichotomy. And then the second thing, there is a lot of tenants that are people that are buying apartments, and they're most of the year empty. So you have these kind of things of housing are going up, and there are places that are completely empty. So I don't know. They're doing a lot of policies so far, but from my point of view, I think the biggest problem is that Barcelona or Spain doesn't have a good program of public housing, and that's creating the main problem. So we need to have a certain number of houses or apartments out of the private market and put it for other use, for other type of people. And it's funny because the last time we have public housing projects in a big, large, it was during the dictatorship. So the last housing projects from the public sector came from the last years of General Franco dictatorship. So after that, during democracy, there's no major projects of public housing.
Thank you. We have a question now here with Dr. Garcia.
Thank you for the presentation. I really supply the time. The level looks slightly different from the other colleagues who comment. I think we are saying, but since I'm an architect, I'm learning from the time. When I hear about this, the first thing that hits my mind is also most of the think about the work of renewable. Think about renewable. Talking about character. When we start talking about sustainability, these are the key elements that we should be pushing forward. Because I can't relate to what we're talking about. Sustainability, housing, water are very critical. But I think all of these elements should be support of what constitutes character, the image of Barcelona.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to.
The problem is that, well, yeah, thank you. That's a very interesting question. I don't know. You know, as far as I know, Rambla is a word that is a derivation of an Arabic word that means a water wash, an area where used to be the water crossing. I don't know what is the exact name in Arabic, but what I heard always is Rambla is that means. The problem is that when you get this massive amount of tourists, these tourist attractions are being promoted by different ways. They get into those spaces and the traditional use and the character is lost. So if you go to the Ramblas, it was very interesting. I don't know, remember, in 2017, there was a terrorist attack in Ramblas. And I remember I was traveling. I was not in Barcelona, I was overseas. And what I heard, there was this, it was one of those tracks that went through the street and killed, I don't know how many people. When I heard the attack, everyone was crazy. Oh, maybe we don't. And I said, it's 3 o'clock in August in Ramblas. There will be no Spanish people in that attack. And that was true. There was no Spanish people because basically we're only tourists. The Ramblas is one of the biggest areas that has this problem. So most of the shops around the Ramblas are no longer the traditional shops. It's basically shops for tourists, souvenirs and stuff like that, or big food companies. And that's a big problem. So how you maintain the quality? There's actually a plan that's called the Rambla Plan to recover the Ramblas to their old uses. Because there was a very interesting, there's a urban planner that's called Itziar Gonzalez that's done a fantastic job trying to do. And I remember going to a presentation in which she was presenting this plan, and he was telling us that in Ramblas, they only have 70 residents in the whole Ramblas. Ramblas is a huge boulevard that is probably, what, I don't know, 1 or 2 kilometers long. 5 kilometers. So it's only 70 residents living there. The rest is tourist space or hotels or restaurants or whatever. So how you gain that space again for locals, that's part. And I think many cities that have a long tradition, the same thing will happen here. We need to defend that character. And that's another side of the sustainability we are losing. I completely agree with you. Same thing happens with Paraguay. Paraguay is another of the big attractions by Gaudí. Paraguay used to be free. You can visit, there was a park, so you enter the number of visitors was so huge. You have to create a space for the buses to drop and get in the people. And now they charge a fee to get even for locals. So it's all these problems that created when you had a Sagrada Familia, for example. They charge like 30 euros to get inside. The funny thing is they found out, but now it's on all media, so it's not longer a solution. If you say you want to listen the mass on Sunday morning, it's free. So they have huge lines and lines of tourists that are obviously not Christian getting into that one because that way they avoid paying the 30 euros. So all these things are creating higher prices and densification some areas. Sometimes when I talk to my students, because I think Ramblas is an example of what a boulevard is used in Mediterranean cities. We have examples like that all over. And I tell them, if you want to experience what a real Ramblas looks like, you have to go to the other boulevards that are around the city that they have no tourists, because this is when you have people playing, people just chatting, cafes and places, people just enjoying getting outside. So I think, yes, that's a very key important topic we need to deal with. Yeah, completely.
Now, from Lisbon again, from our colleague Eva Pires. I think she knows you. She's from the School of Science and Social Sciences and Humanities again. Eva, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Tony, for this interesting presentation. And I think that from that presentation, it is really clear that we not only share lots of problems, but we also share huge lack of solutions and sustainable solutions. I think it's also very clear that we need to think the city in an integrated way. We cannot think each problem one by one. We cannot think about environment, social problems, economical problems, mobility problems. We need to integrate them all. And we also need to have solutions at a multi-scale analysis. We cannot think the city by itself. We need to think the city and the region. So this, of course, puts a lot of governance problems. But it's really important to think in this integrated, holistic way. For example, If the mobility challenge is being considered of elderly population that lives inside the city center, when you think about this mobility, do we think about everyone, or are we designing a city for middle high educated class, for example? What about the others? Are we designing and thinking about these problems considering all the target publics of the city, or only parts of these target publics, namely this middle high educated class? So I think this is very important. But do you think that we are on the right way, thinking the city as an holistic perspective, or are we still considering the problems one by one, for example? And thank you.
Well, this is the university has to blame for that, because problems are comprehensive and we train people in particular fields. So this is an area to talk about the cities that we need engineers, sociologists, economists, geographers, planners, all sorts of people, and each of them is trained in a different way. How to create a space where they can discuss each other on those topics is very difficult. Yes. I don't think we are taking those things comprehensively, and it's very clear some of the problems we have is because nobody planned, nobody thought in the city in a much more comprehensive way. And I should say that when we talk about environmental problems in particular, the distinction between the urban and the rural should be completely disappear, because the resources, as I don't know, someone mentioned before, this idea of producing water for their own city, so producing our own energy, all those things, until very recently, and that's part of the heritage of the Industrial Revolution, we thought about the countryside as the provider of resources, and then the city is only the consumption of those resources. I think we need to start thinking in a way that we balance this system, because it doesn't work. We need the countryside or the forest, or not only as a provider of resources, but as a space, as a reservoir for other type of things. So for maintain the system in a much more sustainable way. So I think definitely we haven't done a very good job in approaching these issues of the urban area for a comprehensive. Well, maybe that's Joao is here. Maybe another of the degrees Utopia should do is urban studies. You can hire me.
Thank you. Now we have José Ferreira from the School of Science and Technology. José.
Thank you. I'm so sorry about the video. I don't have video because all the time, because I have internet problems because of bad weather. I don't live in the center of the city. I live a little bit far away. So it's one of the problems that we have at unstable internet. So I'm presenting myself. I'm professor at Nova School of Science and Technology, and I coordinate one of our masters, the Master in Sustainable Urbanism and Land Use Planning. Is a master with association in association with the Faculty of Science and Social and Human Science. Some of our colleagues are here today with us. As a part of Sustainable Urban Planning project in this master degree, Barcelona is one of the cities chosen for our annual visits with our students. Every year we go with our students to see the urban experience. Is that why your presentation today? It's very, very, very interesting. In particular, all the environmental and social transformation. For example, the examples that you said, it's very, very, very interesting. The super blocks, the green infrastructure, the green corridors, the tactical urbanism, and the benefits of the tactical urbanism. I understood that you are a little bit critic to this solution, but for us it's very interesting to see the benefits, but also studying the problems. So one of the questions that we talk about, that you talk about in your presentation, is it's a very interesting problem, that is the urban gentrification, or better, like the green gentrification, and also the problems of the mobility, and also the problems of the quality of the air, housing. So is that why all year during a week we go to Barcelona to have an intensive workshop with local experts from the municipality, the university, and it's very interesting because students come really inspired. And Barcelona, as we saw with your presentation, have the main problems and challenge, of course, a different scale, like Lisbon, for example, or Porto, or another big city or metropolitan area in Portugal. So, my opinion, Barcelona has an excellent diagnosis. It knows also how to solve the problems. But what is very interesting for us is that the point of view of urban planning, it's not afraid to make and take mistakes, to experiment, to learn from the mistakes, and also to adapt. That's why tactical urbanism is so interesting, because you can experiment without making a definitive solution. It's very interesting when you talk about the financial problems, and also the lack of financial is that why the municipality of Barcelona use the tactical urbanism. One of the most influential urban planners in the world, the mayor of Curitiba, Jaime Lerner, said, if you want to have an efficient solution, cut a zero from the budget. If you want to have a creative, efficient solution that really works and that really goes to respond to the need of the people, cut to zeros. So it's an interesting way to saying that money it's always the solution. So from the point of view of urbanism and land use planning on local scale, what is the main problem? In your opinion, Tony, what is the main problem? What is the key to challenge in the sense of to achieve a real sustainable urban planning and also urban solution for a city like Barcelona, and we have the same problems also for the city like Lisbon. The main problems are related to the mobility, to the car, the intensive use of the cars, the individual mobility. The main problem are the gentrification or the green gentrification, as you told us, is housing. You don't talk about food security, but it's also a problem. And Maria-José talk about water. What is, in your opinion, the main problem that we need to beginning to work to achieve this sustainability that we want to achieve for our cities? And thank you very much. And by the way, it's very interesting if you join to us the next study visit in Barcelona next September or October. We need to work with the next visit with our colleagues from the Faculty of Science and Social Science. So if you want to accept this challenge to work with us in the next workshop in Barcelona, I think it's very interesting for us and it's very interesting for our students. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Of course, I accept the challenge. You can contact me and I'll be delighted. I'm still quite critical about the tactical urbanism because I think it's a problem with scale. They have solved problems in particular neighborhoods, but without thinking the side effects on the larger scale. And I think that's the difference between geographers and architects or urban planners, the scale of what we look at the problems. And I think they haven't solved the problem of these changes in the city fabric of the center of Barcelona are increasing the prices even more in those areas and creating even more disadvantages so the people can only move with cars or with private transportation to those areas where they work, and that could be in that area. So I think we need to think even more. I like it in general. So from a perspective of looking at all the facts, on the quality of on those streets that have done that, it's fantastic. but I think they need to work. It's a little bit more complex than just that. And I wish that with your question, I wish I know what we have to start with. I think the main idea, we need to zoom in and zoom out. So we need to go, that's where geographers get closer to engineers, that it looks on a much more comprehensive way, much larger. And sometimes, well, probably the architects is no longer here. That's a problem with architects. They look only on the building environment and they don't think about everything else. And I keep telling you, know, for a geographer,
Agree.
Okay, let's go now for the last two questions.
Okay.
One in the room and one online.
okay.
So on the room now, Dr. We have Iman, our faculty member.
Thanks, Professor, for the presentation. I want to ask about what is the new structure that was being studied, the line of the new city. It's the line, new city. Like, look at the architecture that you mentioned, or lost now, it's just wrong. Do you think that futuristic cities would make a change, provide a solution with the problems you mentioned, such as futuristic cities? What are the answer project that burning? I want to do research about the border cities.
No?
The border cities.
Yes.
Right. So I hope just from one of the researchers that the people at the border don't live across your or through the borders, but rather between the borders. So actually, we have a similar situation in the area, you know, in Gaza and so on. So we have most people. How can the life of some people be more different? Yes, or I don't know how. Who is responsible for doing such a thing? One of the you mentioned that sub-Saharan area gonna be one of the most areas for development, but also I was from typically now. These areas are suffering. They are one people are living in these areas, but they suffer from poverty, disease, conflict. So who gonna do those cities with which money?
Well, I think, well, there are a lot of questions here. I will be to be short. I really like the whole experiment of the Saudi Arabia thing, and I think it's a like of an interesting lab. It will be successful or not, we will see, but it's interesting as a lab right now. But actually, you have here an incredible lab here. You're making a huge city around this. It's amazing, and if it's that successful, it can be a model for future developments elsewhere, in an area with a lot of with a very particular environment in terms of resources. So I think there are similar labs all over the place. The idea of line cities have been existed. You know, I don't know if you've been in Madrid, but there is a whole section in Madrid that's called the linear city, because it was a design in the 19th century of creating a line city. You know, the problem is that you have to plan very well, because if not, the only street that connects the whole thing gets congested. But I don't know, that project in the Saudi Arabia is, you know, I would love to live enough to be able to visit, but if it happens. But, you know, there is experiments that are being working. You know, I remember when they started to talk about the development of the island cities in Dubai, it seems like something impossible, and now it works, and now there's people that saying it's not working, you know, is all this stuff. Your second question was about, that's a very interesting concept. And my work was in the American-Mexico border. Borders in Europe are not that interesting anymore because there's no border anymore, but still people commute constantly, you know, they go, you know, people try to get the best of each side. So whatever product is cheaper or service is cheaper on one side, they go from one place to another. The case of Gaza is different. Because that's a border within a border, so it's a different levels of borders. But that's again, it's a problem of for me is jurisdiction. So we have here the city jurisdiction on top of the state jurisdiction in countries that doesn't, well, and that's why I say in some cases we need to think beyond our traditional idea of cities. And that goes into a different point of view. That's a completely different thing. Is what are the rights of citizens, whatever they leave? So why we have to make these distinctions in some cases? So that the third one is, okay. Well, that's for me. It's a very interesting. I remember when I was studying in the Arizona case, there were all these idea that what's called cities that have all these slums. That is called what's called it's I say this no, it's not, this has an adjective that it would call it unstable housing, you know, these areas that are not the normal. And then when you go cities like Mexico City, that more than 50% of the territory is slums. Why we consider that not the official city and the other yes? So, you know, these type of things, that will be a huge challenge in those places, how we transform those areas that were slums into those things. The other thing, the cases in Spain that slums transform into a real city, they are kind of a very organic cities. In a way, they are not really efficient in terms of transportation, but they're very, in some cases, very efficient in terms of social. So I don't know, they will be very interesting and challenging, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, last question, big responsibility. I'm going to ask Rui Lopes to address this question and to introduce himself first.
Hi everyone, my name is Rui Lopes. I'm a professor at the Nova School of Science and Technology at the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. So I would have a lot of technical questions for Antonio, but that's not what I would like to ask, of course. First of all, thank you for the very interesting presentation. And I learned, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but if I can learn something today is that we should not look at these problems one by one, but we should have an holistic view, as my colleague Eva referred. And my question is very simple. How can we finance all the implementation that we need to do to solve this in a holistic way?
How we fund?
Yes.
Of the second part of the question?
The several solutions, one by one or in a holistic way, how can we finance this? Because at least from what we see is that governments are trying not to spend any money until the problem gets very, very bad, as it is the case of the water resources or the social housing. So how can we change this approach and try to finance this in a timely fashion?
Well, I hope I can know that, but I think what we need is to think carefully what are all the possible solutions and to find what is more efficient in the long term. For me, one of the problems in most of those things have to do with public policy. And in some cases, some solutions are taken in a time span that helps the politicians for being re-elected and stuff. So they go into 4 years period. And some cases in this type of planning, we need to plan things on 30 years in ahead and things like that. And sometimes that doesn't really get the same attention of a very flashy project that you can show immediately and then you get all these recognition. So we need time to think about it and think in a very comprehensive way and think about the best way to fund it. I think not all the solutions, and that was the comment on the tactic urbanism, not all the best solutions are based on very costly infrastructure. Sometimes it's more about changing attitudes or habits than anything else. But I understand there's some infrastructures that we need big funding. I don't know. I think people should be able, we need to think carefully in the long run, and it again is planning long period of time. How we use our taxes or the way we tax the people to use for those things will be valid not only for next year but for the next 30, 40 years. That's I think the main thing we need to think when we think into these type of projects. I don't know if I answer your questions, but
yes, it's not, maybe it's not the amount, but the time frame we should consider for these projects. And yeah,
well, that's what scholars, scientists, we need to push to tell the decision makers that the fast solution is probably not the best one, and that's our responsibility. But honestly, that's not easy.
thank you so much, Antonio.
I'm going to ask our Vice Rector, Professor João Marbatos, to address the final words of this conference. João?
Thank you, Francisco. Can you hear me all? Is this okay? Good. Well, lots of thanks to all the participants and people that are online and of course in the room that I cannot see, but especially to Tony Luna, who's a good friend and a remarkable academic for his talk. It was very impressive, very interesting. I'm not from the area, I'm in finance. I'm a simple physicist, but I was, driven by all the topics. I think it's quite relevant because it's so broad. What I really miss here, and it's not a question, Tony, don't worry, but it's the lack of, for instance, it tackles all of us. I mean, for instance, a political scientist would think about everything that you say in terms of the future political landscape of our communities and our cities. I mean, we are currently under a campaign for elections in Portugal for the parliament. And certainly some of the topics that are driving the discussion is housing, is mobility in the cities. Issues like those are present in the political platform. So my big issue on the back of my mind that I don't want to involve in the discussion is how all those issues will affect the political landscape in the near future. Will the far right come into power under the arguments of the questions raised by sustainability or not? Is the left wing able to provide a social consistent solution to these problems or not? And I think that there are a lot of open questions in that. And this is a physicist talking to you. I think that this is a common concern for all of us. I would like once again to thank you for your generosity, your availability, all our friends from TKH that runs our campus in Cairo, and for all the participants, not only from Nova, but I saw many other people or from other EUTOPIA universities attending. And of course, Francisco Caramelo and the team in Cairo, who had a very, very important role supporting this event. Thank you all so much. And I leave it to Francisco because I think he has a little gift for you. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we are going to conclude expressing our gratitude to Tony for your kindness and also for the huge interest that your conference has generated here. So this was the first of 3 EUTOPIA talks, and I think we have started with the right foot. So we have a symbolic gift for you. So in order to remember Cairo and the Nova here in Cairo, and our TKH also, which is hosting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please, a big applause to our guests.
Thank you.
Hey, Brita.
And thank you very much, you all. So I hope you will be with us on the next 25th of February, the second Utopia talk. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.